Okay, let's take a look at charcoal and chalk, things like that. Okay, so here's a self-portrait, and we'll duplicate it, go into Topaz Studio 2. Through the magic of editing video, you don't have to wait for my software to load much. And what we're going to do is look up charcoal, and we can let this generate previews. Charcoal tends to be anywhere from very coarse like this. It could end up being quite smooth, and I can show you just through this how we can change this one look to look like a smooth charcoal sketch. So while charcoal can be rough like this, sometimes it can be very realistic. One of the nice things about charcoal is you can smudge it with your finger or palm and tissue or whatever and get all these strokes to blend in. How do we do that in impression? And are we making the abstraction portion of this a little too dull? No, it looks pretty good. What I'm looking for is to take away some of the detail in the beard because that would not be photorealistic. So here you can see every little skinny individual hair, and that would not really represent charcoal sketches. So by using abstraction and making it rougher, we pave the way in preparation to make a charcoal sketch. Now that happens to be very rough. I'm going to give you a wider view for a little bit. Go into impression, and one of the first things I'm going to do is go to high to try to get to a more photorealistic look. Not all the way. I don't really like that. If I'm going to do charcoal or chalk, I want to be a bit rougher. Still a little too rough perhaps. One of the things we can do to fill in these voids is increase the brush size a little bit. I'm going to decrease the paint volume because I want to have less distinction in the paint strokes here. Decrease the paint opacity, and we're going to have to go higher yet on the brush. Yeah, there we go. And you can see we're getting a little more detail in here. Go up on the paint strokes. The other thing we can do is change the brush. So instead of using something as coarse as this, perhaps use something like this. So switch from type 11 to type 8 and maybe that type 10. I think the underlying picture is just a little bit too dark. So if I add another adjustment and bring that below our impression, I can increase the exposure. There we go. And we can always tame the highlights a little bit, but I still want to have the white level up and the blacks down a little bit for drama. And another thing to blend those strokes is to smudge it a little bit. If you bring up the spill, usually the strokes become too wild, so leave the spill down pretty low, if not zero, and bring up the smudge a bit. And you can see how that smooths things out quite nicely. Let's zoom in on that. And you can see that we're getting a pretty nice effect here. And should have probably a medium gray background. Maybe type 8 paper here. See a little bit of grit to the paper, which is often used for things like pastel charcoal and chalk in order to aid the chalk coming off or the charcoal. So that's just another look, is a soft charcoal look. Remember, one of the keys here was to use abstraction, and under impression, make sure your smudge is turned up a bit, just as if you'd taken your hand and smudged all that charcoal around just enough. You know, you take your little finger and rub it on the charcoal strokes and blend one area into the other. Another thing we can do is add some things like bloom and radiance. An easy way to do that is to come in here to something like glow. And a couple of my favorites here are auto shine and bloom. So let's look at bloom. Pretty good. I don't really like the wiry look here, so we have to look inside bloom and see what's going on. Yeah, the electrify is on. Okay, we're losing the tracking here in Topaz Studio 2, so I shut off the visibility of each look and then turn it back on. Usually it'll work. Still, the electrify is going on. There we go. Get rid of the electrify and shut off bloom. Turn on bloom. Maybe a little too much loss of highlight here. Go back to our basic adjustment and maybe take that highlight and white level down a bit. And that's a nice portrait. So I'd call that a day. And there's the end product. And this is the coarser charcoal and chalk look.